welcome to ILTV's Elections Arena. I'm Aaron Porras, and today in the ring, the Knesset is undergoing some major changes amidst an ongoing crisis with the coronavirus, but the right-wing bloc under Prime Minister Netanyahu seems to be hard at work in attempts to stall. Joining us to discuss is political strategist and director of English operations with the Yamina Party, Jeremy Saltan, and Mossi Raz, a former member of Knesset with the Meretz Party. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining us today. Now, let's get to our first topic. Following an initial delay, the brand new 23rd Knesset has started to dole out rolls, and in accordance with Health Ministry regulations, Knesset members entered in batches of 6 to cast their votes and form important committees. But Knesset Speaker and Likud MK Yuli Edelstein had originally tried to stall the Knesset's votes, including a vote on his potential replacement, by suspending the Knesset under the pretense of concerns for health. He later admitted, however, that he was actually trying to buy a little bit of time to form a unity government between the Likud and the blue and white parties. Well, the High Court has since ruled that the vote must go on, and 6 important Knesset committees have now been formed. But none of the right-wing or religious MKs have cast a ballot, instead choosing to boycott or even filibuster on the floor. And some are even threatening fourth elections pending these votes.
מעולם כנסת ישראל לא פעלה באופן חד צדדי ולא אפשרה הקמת ועדות כנסת שלא בתיאום ושלא מתוך הבנה והסכמות. החלטת בג"ץ מהיום היא בעצם השתלטות על הכנסת, דבר שמנוגד לכל דמוקרטיה.
So, Jeremy, now, critics are saying that Edelstein's attempt to suspend the Knesset, even for a moment, was an attempted coup. How do you respond?
Well, that's ridiculous. It's as ridiculous as all of these allegations that democracy in Israel is over. Well, if democracy in Israel is over, you would not have seen what we saw yesterday, which was a vote in the Knesset, which went ahead and gave a majority to the committee chairs and positions to the current opposition. Now it is within Speaker Edelstein.
But that was in spite of Speaker Edelstein, was it not?
So once again, it's Speaker Edelstein who goes ahead within his authority as Speaker to go ahead and set the agenda. He had said last week, and he went ahead and did so, he did go ahead and hold the votes that were held yesterday in order to form the different committees. Now, as it was mentioned, and it's important to stress this, in the great majority of cases, all Knesset factions have agreed in terms of the makeup of committees. This is a very big exception. The only thing that comes close to this is 2015, where Yisrael Beitenu demanded a vote because they were a member of the opposition, and the opposition did not go ahead and give them what they felt was the right committee number of appointments. The coalition was not looking to give Yisrael Beitenu at that time anything on their account. But what we have here today is a very clear situation in which we have Edelstein as the speaker setting the agenda. When there are items that are brought up that are requested for a vote, they go ahead and they go out to vote. He has the authority to delay.
So, Mossi, how do you react to all this? Because I know you have a different take.
Yes, I'm not using terms as coup or end of democracy. Anyhow, our democracy is not in best shape. But I think that the Speaker of the Knesset has to understand that the majority of the members of the elected Knesset doesn't want him to be the Speaker. And we should bring to immediate vote this question of who is going to be the Speaker of the Knesset. It is the way that we used to act all over the years of the history of Israel. There is a clear majority to somebody else, and the Speaker is using the fact that he was the Speaker in order to actually prevent a discussion in the plenary about that. I do believe that the Speaker is going to obey to the decision of the Supreme Court that was very clear, 5-0, very, very clear, that he has to bring this issue to the plenary until tomorrow, and I'm sure he's going to do that. And this is going to be the end of his term as a speaker. He was quite a good speaker until a few months ago when he started to be only one of members of the Knesset committed to his party and not anymore.
Who do you think will replace him as the speaker? Who is the likely replacement?
I couldn't hear you.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay, so I want to ask about the formation of some of these committees, including the Labor and Welfare Committee and the Defense Committee. Why would the right wing boycott or filibuster these votes instead of take part in them, and maybe even by taking part gain some sort of influence instead of boycotting altogether?
So the reason that this is happening is because you need to send a message to what Benny Gantz is trying to do. What he wants to do is to take the speakership, and then he wants to pass a series of laws that would prevent Netanyahu from receiving the ability to form a government in the second mandate. That would disqualify Netanyahu, who's the candidate of the right-wing bloc, from being able to form a government. Gantz hopes that by doing so, he'll be able to convince Likud and the right-wing bloc to either replace Netanyahu from someone from within or be willing to break up the bloc and then have a situation where maybe one of the individual parties would go ahead and negotiate with him. What we're trying to do here is send a very clear message that what Gantz is doing here is going to send us to a fourth election. The results are very clear from this election. You have 58 that are in a right-wing bloc that support Netanyahu. You do have currently 61 MKs that agree that they do not like Netanyahu, but you do not have 61 MKs that are willing to back Gantz for prime minister. So instead of going ahead and using the majority of the 61 which he has to become prime minister, since he does not have the votes to do so, he's choosing to go ahead and use those 61 votes to change the speaker so that he's in a better position either to negotiate or when we go to a fourth election, which we are, again, doing everything we can to try to prevent.
Mossi?
First,
Is that what they're trying to do? Is they're trying to prevent Netanyahu from being in politics anymore, essentially?
I think he should do that. I'm not sure that he's doing that. But what I want to say that what is using the majority? This majority was just elected by the citizens of Israel, and the majority in the Knesset doesn't want this speaker. I do think that the majority in the Knesset too, 61, as was mentioned, who recommended on Benny Gantz to be prime minister, has to form a coalition, has to form a government, and they have to make some compromises in order to do that. But they should not, disagree about small things like who is voting for. Very stupid question at all, very undemocratic one. And now I do use the term undemocratic. And this 61 has to form a coalition. And here I come with criticism to Mr. Gantz. He has to tell the president that he has a government, that he has a coalition, and to bring it to a vote in the plenary. I do believe that all the 61 will support this government because they understand that this is the best thing to Israel. This is the best thing to the citizens of Israel. This is the best thing to democracy. And this is the only way to go out of this constitutional problem, constitutional crisis, and to prevent fourth elections in these terrible days that people cannot go outside and, of course, cannot go outside to vote. So this is the best way for us now. This is the best way to fight the coronavirus. This is the best way to our democracy, to our security, and, of course, to fight corruption.
Jeremy, it looks like you disagreed with Mossi's analysis about this being the best way to fight the coronavirus, but one of the 6 committees that has just been formed is a committee to address the coronavirus. So why do you disagree?
Well, first of all, I think it's a good idea to have the coronavirus combat committee. I think that's a good thing. I think you should have parliamentary supervision on that. I do agree with Mossi. But again, we have to understand why Gantz is choosing to go ahead and instead of spending the mandate which he received from President Rivlin in trying to form a government instead of sitting with the leaders of the parties that recommended him and going ahead and negotiating coalition agreements and signing them and publicizing them and really calling for a vote. He's decided instead that what he wants to do is take over the Knesset.
Well, but he still has time to form a coalition.
He has an ability to go ahead and form a coalition. He has the mandate to do so. Netanyahu does not. But what Gantz is trying to do, since he has come to the conclusion that he cannot form a government, that the 61 MKs that recommended him did so in order for Netanyahu not to get the mandate, not because they plan on voting for Gantz for prime minister, and he wants to use those 61, which again, it's his democratic right to go ahead and do so, as well as the other 60 who support him, to go ahead and pursue legislation. But by going ahead and doing so, they are changing the rules of the game after the game has already been played, and that's something that we have a very big issue with. In fact, if this does happen, that will send us to a fourth election where the agenda of the fourth election will be Netanyahu asking people to support him so that he can revoke that law, repeal it, and bring us back to where we were beforehand. So again, instead of Gantz, and this is really what I think he should do in order to really combat the coronavirus if he's serious, is instead of trying to go ahead and disqualify Netanyahu, which he's done now for 3 straight elections, he has to wake up to the music that there is a very, very big, it might not be a majority, but 58 out of 120 is a lot. There's a very, very big group of people within the state of Israel that view Benjamin Netanyahu as their leader, and this is not the time for petty politics, and to go ahead and enter into real negotiations for real national emergency government.
Okay, so there's something to be said for that, because Edelstein supposedly said that he was trying to give time for a unity government, and that fell through, as we're seeing now. Mostly, why do you think that a unity government is not coming to fruition, despite many polls suggesting that, yes, upwards of 60-70% of the public does support such a unity?
You ask me?
Yeah.
Okay, people might support, but I think unity government is the worst option. I think that we could not and we should not cooperate with Netanyahu and with his party that are not only corrupted, but they are, especially Netanyahu, but not only himself, they keep inciting against the citizens, the Arab Palestinian citizens of Israel, 16% of the citizens of Israel. They keep legislate, not right now because they cannot legislate, against equality. They deny even the independence document when they voted against equality to all the citizens of Israel without any defense. So I don't think that we should cooperate with them. If people want a unity government, they can vote for Likud, but people who voted for us, or people even who voted for blue and white, most of them don't want such a government. And now you have to add one more thing. Even many people who do support unity government, and I'm not among them, they have a condition that Prime Minister Netanyahu will not be part of this government because of his corruption. And others have another condition that Benny Gantz will be the prime minister in this unity government. So when you say unity government, the question is, what kind of unity government? And if you say unity government with participation of all the parties in the Knesset, including the United List, then even me personally, I am not against. Do you mean to that? This 67% mean to that? So unity government is only a term that when you say that, it's not the same thing. Some people think socialist is Denmark. Some people think socialist is communist, like the Soviet Union. So what is unity government? Who is going to be the prime minister? Who are going to be the participants? I'm saying here, okay, I support unity government. If prime minister is Gantz, And if some of the representatives of the United List are ministers in this government, and I believe that my colleague will agree with me. Or he will not, and then he is not supporting unity government, because unity government is between all parties in the Knesset, not only Jewish.
All right, well, yeah.
So there's never been at any time within the state of Israel a coalition of 120 MKs. Even when we're looking at national states of emergency, whether it was in 48, 49, or even in 67, where in 67 we had 113 of the 120 MKs, you've never had everybody in the coalition. I also don't think that's the best thing for democracy, to not have anybody in the opposition and to go ahead and to leave that vital part of parliamentary oversight overlooked. And of course, the Joint Lists are not even looking to join the coalition, so that's a moot point. I don't understand why people are really focusing on the idea of including a list in a government that rejects all governments, as long as they go ahead and recognize the basic fact of what it does say in the independence document, which is that we are a Jewish and democratic state. So I just don't get that.
I think that, okay, I agree that we don't need 120 members of Knesset. So maybe we can take out of the government Yamina, the far right, that are not really recognize the democracy in Israel. We just heard the representative of them, who happened to be the law minister, to say that the Knesset should not obey the Supreme Court, and are supporting violent settlement activity outside the borders of Israel, and so on. So they can be out.
So again, this is the attitude. This is the attitude that does not bring us anywhere in the middle of a coronavirus. Where again, what I'm saying is to exclude those who choose to be excluded, and what you're doing is trying to exclude those who want to be included. There's a very big difference between the two.
All right. Well. Speaking of the coronavirus, let's go back to maybe some of the committees that have just been formed. Again, the new coronavirus committee is going to be headed by MK Ofer Shelach of the Blue and White Party. Now, Shelach used to be a journalist specializing in defense and sports. And not that I have anything against journalists, but is he qualified to be the head of the coronavirus task force, as it were?
Yes, in order to be the head of a committee in the Knesset, you don't have to be a physician. You don't have to have PhD. You don't have to be. You have to understand how to manage things. You have to understand how to predict things. And of course, in the committee, I know how committees in the Knesset work. I happen to be a member of the Knesset more than 4 years, and I happened to work in the Knesset before I was a member of the Knesset for 3 years. The committees hear the best experts. The head of the committee doesn't have to be an expert by himself, and but he has to be clever, and Ofer Shelach is clever. He has to be a person who knows how to ask questions, and Shelach knows very well how to ask questions. So I think, yes, he's the right person in the right place.
Okay. Now, what about in the Finance Committee? Because there was actually quite a bit of a turnover here. For a long time, we've had from the Haredi parties the Moshe Gafni as head of the Finance Committee, and it's now been taken over by Oded Forer of Israel Beitenu. Now, this is a big change because the two of them, come from parties with very different agendas. How do you think that might translate into real legislation or real policy?
I don't think there's going to be much legislation until there's the formation of a government, which unfortunately, as I said, the path that Benny Gantz is sending us on is one towards a fourth election. What is going to happen with Oded being in charge now of, you call it the finance, it's really the appropriations committee, is you're going to have a situation where we're going to have the caretaker government that's looking to go ahead and budget items without a state budget to deal with the coronavirus. And you're going to have Oded Forer in the situation where he needs to make a decision in a outgoing Knesset that does not have confidence of any government, if it's indeed going to go ahead and move those
well, but so isn't that true? Isn't that alleged inefficacy true of all of these committees then? Because without a coalition, are you saying that none of them have any power?
I mean, if anyone read Speaker Edelstein's response to the Supreme Court in between their two decisions, his position was the danger of choosing a speaker now when we do not know the identity of the next government or the coalition partners is that you could have an opposition member end up taking the speakership, and you could have chairmen of committees of what ends up becoming the opposition, and that would create of being able to go ahead and to move things forward in terms of any sort of agenda. Let's say, for instance, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's say that the legislation that Benny Gantz wants to pass through does not happen. The second mandate goes to Benjamin Netanyahu. He forms a coalition with the 58 bloc along with Orly Levy, as well as Hauser and Hendel, who can break away since they're 2 of 5 MKs in Telem. So they have a third. And in that situation where it would be 61 in the other direction, then the Netanyahu government would have to work with coalition chairman and a speaker that is in the opposition to the government. So, that is a possible scenario that we could end up dealing with. But more likely, like I said, unfortunately, we're going to end up in a fourth election.
All right. Mostly, I'm going to give you the last 20 seconds to respond, and then unfortunately, we have to end the show. So go ahead.
I think it happened in the past. That it will be even positive, even good, if it happens in the future, that the Speaker of the Knesset will be part of the opposition. This is exactly how democracy should work. The Speaker of the Knesset from the opposition, making the Knesset stronger and ensure that the Knesset will be enforced to make his job and not only to support the government. The Knesset has a job in the democracy system, and not only to be a kind of cheerleaders of the government.
All right. Thank you, gentlemen, so much. That unfortunately is all the time that we have in the elections arena today. I'd like to thank you again, Mossi Raz and Jeremy Saltan, for joining us, and thanks to all of you for tuning in. Also, remember that for more news from ILTV, please follow us on Facebook, like us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV channels. I'm Aaron Porras. See you next time, and stay safe. Keep social distancing.